I suppose we could just start, and I'll introduce you as Bill Duff, son of Dunfermline goalkeeper Willie Duff, who played for us between 1967 and 70. Do you know much of why your dad came to Dunfermline?
Yeah, well, you know, he was nearing the end of his career, and Peterborough, it's kind of funny because as a kid, you know, everybody talks about army kids and stuff, but as a footballer's kid, we moved from Edinburgh to London to Peterborough, back to Edinburgh. As I say, he was nearing the end of his career, and I guess he thought that going back to Edinburgh and joining his father with his joinery business, and then George Farm came along, and who was actually with Raith Rovers at the time, and wanted to sign him for there. Told my dad, hold on, don't sign, I think something's going to happen. And then George jumped from Raith Rovers to East End Park. And obviously my dad signed there, and he was kind of over the moon at that.
Yeah, because at that time Dunfermline had a great team, and we had just won the Scottish Cup for the second time. So he obviously saw it as maybe a better team to come to at that time.
Yeah, again, you know, he was just, I guess he thought he was lucky enough to have another club before actually retiring. The trial, and I remember him driving through every day for training and stuff, and coming back, and then going to work in the afternoon, unless they got called in for, if they got beat, they got called in for extra training, you know.
So how old were you then?
I guess I was about 14.
Yeah.
13, 14, when we came back up to Edinburgh, and they bought a house in Clarewood, which was kind of a newish kind of development at the time. Obviously, I went to, when we first came back up from Peterborough, we stayed at my grandparents because we didn't have anywhere to go. So I went to a school down in Granton called Ainslie Park. And then, as I say, my dad went through every day. It's funny because you think it was in those days, it was a huge distance, you know. It's only about 10 miles, maybe 12. But he went through every day, and he did his training and came back. And, you know, on the weekends, or if there was midweek games, we'd all jump in the car and come through. And as I say, we had some great times.
Yeah. Your dad had a successful career before he actually came to Dunfermline. So when he was with Hearts, and then he went down south. So he had a successful time before he came to us.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of funny. He joined Hearts in, I think it was end of 53. And he was out one day. He was actually a centre half. And the story goes that the goalkeeper never turned up, so he went in goals, and that was that. And if you ever saw the size of his hands, they were like shovels. I mean, they were huge. I have his wedding ring somewhere around here. I can put it on my thumb, and it would just fall off. I mean, his hands were just huge. Again, Hearts won the Cup, League Cup 54-55, and then the Scottish Cup 55-56. He got drafted into the army, and why, and this is still a mystery, he wasn't deployed locally. He went down to London to the Royal Artillery, and he played a few British Army games, one at Tynecastle, one at Easter Road, as a matter of fact. And he had to do his year national service. Once he completed that, he signed for Charlton. Why he never came back up, well, Gordon Marshall took over in goals, and they had a great team in the late 50s, 58, 59, you know. Anyway, he played for Charlton, took over basically from Sam Bartram. But I mean, that's huge gloves to fill, you know. Stayed at Charlton till 63, and then moved up to Peterborough for 3 seasons before 4 seasons before coming up to Dunfermline. And if you look along the lines, Charlton never did that much in general, but when he got to Peterborough, Peterborough got to the 6th round of the FA Cup. They beat Arsenal, they beat a bunch of teams along the way, and ended up playing Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, which is a game I'll never forget. The captain, Vic Crowe, pulled a groin, I think it was in the 4th minute, and he went off, no subs or anything in those days. And before we knew it, it was like 3 or 4-0 before half-time. Ended up 5-1, and ironically, the guy that scored the goal was Vic Crowe. He came back on with so many minutes to play. He scored the 1 goal. But they won the Daily Mirror Giant Killers Cup.
Right.
And, you know, Peterborough had a really good side in those days. They had Derek Dugan, just some great names. And then, as I say, he kind of had a falling out with the manager, as players always do.
Yeah.
They have their own ideas. And he got released. I think, I can't remember if Dunfermline actually paid a fee for him or if he was just a free. I think he was a free.
Yeah.
So anyway, coming back to Dunfermline was just, back up to Scotland was just great in general, you know.
He signed out roughly at the same time as Paddy Gardner and I think Barry Mitchell. So did he make any comment on, you know, the team and what type of squad it was that we had at that time?
You know, he was always very quiet about football, always. Right. And because I remember him saying to me, myself, he said, you know, if you want to make it in the game, you're going to have to do it on your own back. Right. And of course, everybody always said to me, "Oh, you're Willie Duff, son. You know, you should be." It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. But no, he was very quiet. I think he realised that Dunfermline, you know, again with Pat Gardner, Roy Barry, you couldn't get any 2 better defenders than John Lunn and Callahan.
Yeah.
So you know, he just kind of took it day by day. And of course, once they qualified for the Cup Winners' Cup, all the away trips they had, and you know, the success until we got to Bratislava, of course, you know, which was unfortunate. Yeah. Because it could have gone the other way.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Because your dad played in the West Brom game.
Yes, he did. That was most probably one of the most memorable, the away game anyway, it was probably one of the most memorable nights ever. I remember being at East End Park in that cold, blustery, freezing evening, and then when the video went out, of course, everybody's, you know, and we never stopped.
Yeah, it was a windy night, and one of the screens blew down.
Blew over, yeah. But I guess the save of the game, you know, I think it was Jeff Astle. It might not have been, but whoever it was broke through, and he was closing in on goal, and you come out, you make yourself as big as possible, and the ball rebounded off his leg and went out for a corner. But I have a photo. We just moved house, so I've got everything in boxes, and I was going to get some photographs out, but I remember George Farm walking up to him as soon as the final whistle went and shook his hand, you know. Yeah. It was just a memorable evening.
Yeah, because because Paddy Gardner scored so early, it was kind of backs to the wall. That everybody played their part in, so it was a bit of a tense game to watch, especially.
Oh, it was very, very, and then especially when the video went out, it was even more frustrating because you couldn't see what the heck was going on, you know.
That's right.
But it was one of the most memorable evenings ever.
Yeah.
Without a game being played on East End Park.
Yeah. What did he think of George Farmley as a manager? And I mean, did he?
He respected him. You know the old saying that you have to be mad to be a goalkeeper. And George was a goalkeeper down at Blackpool and elsewhere, and had a successful career himself. He obviously knew what to look for in goalkeepers. You know, they had Ben Martin, then they brought in John Arrow, had some really good goalkeepers.
Mm-hmm.
Again, he never really spoke about anybody. He was very, very quiet, very shy. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget, there was one night after he retired, my mum and dad moved over to the States. Mm-hmm. They were here for, I think, 13 or 14 years. And we were out one night and there was a karaoke on. And as usual, they got me up to sing Delilah. And afterwards he said, I wish I had the guts to do that. So he was obviously a very, very quiet mm-hmm. guy, you know.
Mm-hmm. One of the, he vied with Ben for his first season, and he didn't play many games his first season with us, but then right. The following season he played quite a lot of games, probably the same amount as Ben. And then, of course, as you say, John Arrow came in as well. So if he was coming towards the end of his career, did he still think that he could do a good job?
Yeah, you know, goalkeepers' fitness is a different level to, you know, you're not running for 90 minutes. Yeah. And I guess he kind of realized that, you know, the day was coming. But if you look at all the teams he played for after he left East End Park, you know, there's obviously still something there. The days out to Hamilton, to Wraith, to, you know, all these different clubs. Albion Rovers, where I was signed. You know, that was kind of a big thing in the evening news, you know, trying to grab the ball from each other, you know. But, you know, he played in the quarter-final of the League Cup for Albion Rovers against Airdrie. Mm-hmm. And again, he played 2 immaculate games as far as a goalkeeper went, and he kind of refused to play the next league game so that I would get a chance, which is another story. But, you know, he just went from club to club to club, and the extra, I don't know what it was, 20, 30 pounds in those days, you know, for second division clubs. I guess he enjoyed it, you know.
Yeah. While he was with us, as well as playing in the Cup Runners' Cup, he played the Fairs Cup at that time, and played two games, against 2 teams, 2 ties, against Bordeaux and also Anderlecht. And it was unfortunate that we got put out by Anderlecht, especially East End Park. But did they ever say anything about the Bordeaux match? It was supposedly quite a battle over there after we had won at East End Park.
Yeah, you know, it was kind of funny. I was at the game at East End Park, and it was a bit of a kicking match. You could, you know, and the referee had no control whatsoever. And if I remember rightly, that was in the days before yellow cards even. I think yellow cards and red cards were introduced just after that. But the referee was kind of just scared to do anything. But the one memory I do have of there was their right winger, and they were kicking from west to east, and running down the stand side was this little right winger who was always getting caught offside. And of course, the crowd, every time it happened, the crowd got incited and there was a lot of noise. And he just turned around and gave him the 2 finger salute one time. It was hysterical. Everybody laughed at it, you know. But the away game, that was even more of a kicking match. He never got involved very much. I'll go back to the day they played Celtic at East End Park, where I think it was Bertie Auld was stood right in front, or Bobby Lennox, I can't remember, one of the two was standing right in front of him and he couldn't kick the ball. And as he moved, the forward moved with him. And he went like this with the ball. And whoever it was went down like a ton of bricks. Well, my dad never touched him, but he took the opportunity and to go down. And of course, that incited the crowd and everything else. But he never really got, angry at all when playing. I think he got his name taken once. And I think, I can't remember I think it was with Dunfermline he was playing for. He saved 2 penalties, but the referee said he moved before the ball was kicked and had his name taken. And then he saved it the 3rd time. Oh. So I think that's how the story went. I've got the newspaper cutting somewhere. But he never got angry. He took everything with a pinch of salt, really. Which you would never get away with in today's game,
No, probably not. When he left Dunfermline, did he think then that was his career over then?
I think so. As I say, it was the phone calls from other clubs. So, we don't have a goalkeeper. It was funny because he could play for like 3 or 4 different clubs in 3 or 4 weeks. Maybe have one Saturday off. So he just kind of enjoyed the thrill of being able to put the boots on one more time.
When he was at Dunfermline, did he speak of anyone in particular that he was friendly with, or that he even came over from Edinburgh with?
No, I guess, when they came to the States in 69, they were up in New York somewhere. And I have an aunt that lives here, my mum's sister, and who lived in Washington, D.C. So I know Bert Payton, and I can't remember who the 3rd one was, but they all came down and stayed with her for the weekend because the game was cancelled. So whatever game it was cancelled, so they had a few days off. Apart from that, he roomed with, I know when they were playing away, he roomed with Doug Bailey, and I know Doug Bailey was a bit of a character.
We've actually tried to speak to Doug Bailey because Chris Wishart from the Former Players Association, he sponsors the guest and hospitality at home games. So we've been trying to get Doug Bailey actually to come along, and he's willing to do it, but we've actually not managed to get him to a game yet. So it's still there. So we need to ask him about Willie Duff.
Well, when Doug retired, he was a reporter for the Sunday Post, and it was just when the internet was getting going, and we got football results in the Washington Post on a Sunday, But Doug would send a copy of the Sunday Post all rolled up in the mail, and you get it 3 weeks later, What's this? Well, we'll read the Bruins and Noor Willie, but that's about it.
When they came to America, because that was a tour after we had won the cup, and they played Man City in that. Did you say that you had a tape of one of the games that they had played?
It's not a tape of the game. When they were over here, my dad bought I can't remember what they call it now, a movie camera, a Super 8. And he took a whole bunch of films of, when they were down in Washington and a whole bunch of other cities they were in. And I came across them a couple of years ago, and I took them in to get them put on disc. And unfortunately, a lot of the images were kind of just destroyed.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I've got the disc now in my van outside, ready to take to Costco, because I don't have a disc thing in this computer. So I've got to have it put on a memory stick.
Oh, right.
But what I can't honestly remember, I think it's mostly just scenic things, nothing about a game. I don't think.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Oh, well, that's a shame.
It is a shame. It is.
Yeah. But you said that you had been at Dunfermline as well. You trained with us.
Yeah, I got Harry Melrose invited. Long story short, I was down in Shrewsbury on trial. Shrewsbury, at the end of the season, they got relegated, so I got let go. I went across to Peterborough. Noel Cantwell was the manager at the time, and I trained for a couple of weeks there. My grandfather passed away, so I went back to Edinburgh. And a good friend of mine, George Donaldson, who was training at East End Park, had a word with Harry, and Harry said, "Yeah, oh yeah, bring him along." So I went along. I remember playing a couple of reserve or A games or whatever they were, and it was just when Laois was starting to come through, and I would hate to go for a high ball with Laois because he just knock you out of the way.
That's not like him.
No, not at all. A bull in a china shop, isn't it?
So you followed your dad in being a goalkeeper as well, then?
Yeah, I hated running. I was always the last, when they were doing, even right at East End Park, if they were doing laps around the park, I'd drag. I mean, I just wasn't a runner. I didn't mind doing the sprints and all the short stuff, but then he asked me to do the laps.
I suppose that one. Did you not go up and down the steps?
Yeah, we did that. I did that at Tynecastle. I remember going to Gullin pre-season because I was at Tynecastle. Again, long story short, I played for Edinburgh City Schools. We won the Scottish Cup there. And we played, Edinburgh Schools played Liverpool Schools at Tynecastle. And after the game, Johnny Harvey, who was the manager at the time at Hearts, came and said, "Hey, would you like to come training on a Tuesday and Thursday?" He didn't realise who I was. And it was kind of funny, but I was at Tynecastle for about a year, training every Tuesday, Thursday. I played maybe a handful of A games at Redford Barracks and other places. It was, Bobby Seath came along and he had a big clear out, and unfortunately I was part of the clear out.
All right.
Yeah.
So who did you end up playing for then?
I guess my first senior club was Albion Rovers. My dad was kind of friendly. He had finished playing, and there was a lot of charity matches with ex-Hearts, Hibs, Rangers, Celtic, and I would always go along. And after about 20 minutes, all these old guys were starting to flail, and "Oh, come on, Willie, get on!" So I was privileged to play with a lot of really, really famous players.
Yeah.
And one of them being Ralph Bryant, who was the manager at Albion Rovers. He signed me. I got asked to go down to Shrewsbury for a trial, so I had to get myself a free from Albion Rovers. And as I say, I went down there. They got relegated after a couple of months. There was no way out. The manager at the time was Alan Durbin, and I think he was at the end of his tether there as well. So they had a big clear out. And it was only actually when I was at East End Park, I got a phone call from Dennis Violet from Manchester United, or ex-Manchester United. And Dennis said, "Hey, would you like to come and play in the States? Would you come over for a trial?" I said, "How soon can you get me a ticket?" And the story goes, he said, "If you pay for your ticket, I'll guarantee you get your money when you get there. I need you there as soon as possible." So I went over, arrived on, I think it was the Tuesday, and on the Wednesday, the Diplomats were playing Las Vegas Quicksilver up at Penn State, just a pre-season game, so to speak. And I'll never forget when I saw Eusebio coming towards me. But
did he score?
No, hell no. No, I parried the ball around for a corner, and it was actually, I didn't even realise who it was at the time, and I'd never seen names on the back of shirts. So when the ball went out for a corner, he was standing in front of me, and I read it, and I went, "Oh!" I was just frozen in space. I just couldn't move when I saw the name on the back of the shirt. And no, he didn't score. Didn't let that happen. But it wasn't long after that I dislocated my knee, and that was that. So I actually didn't sign for the Diplomats. They had visa restrictions at the time, so you could only have so many visa players on the roster, and only so many players actually on the field playing. They had to have a whole bunch of Americans playing, which is fair, you know. It was in their country, their sport. So, and that was kind of the end of the playing career, so to speak.
All right. So you went to the golf then?
Yeah, and that game's gone now as well, unfortunately. But yeah, I business with all this coronavirus going on thing. Last year was 2 years ago. I got into bringing kids over to Scotland, and I had I think it was 79 kids plus parents and grandparents. I had them all over the week of the Open at Carnoustie, and it was the week also I had them playing in junior Open tournaments at places like Kilspindie and North Berwick and whatnot. Then I had a Ryder Cup match with them, with all the Scottish kids. And then on the Saturday, I took them to Carnoustie for the day. So bringing the kids over was a huge year, you know. Unfortunately, with everything that's going on, it's just, nothing's happening right now.
Yeah.
Nothing.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, it was lovely speaking to you, Bill, and nice to hear about your dad. One thing I was actually sent, I don't know if you have it, a photo from Chris Wishart, and he's sent me it, and it's a photo of your dad trying to put out a fire on his van.
Yeah, I got the blame for that, by the way. They'd been away. My mum and dad had been away on holiday, and I guess I just got my driving license or something, and that was his little Ford work van, and I'd taken it out somewhere, and I don't know what happened. But anyway, when he came back, he went out to work one day, and he was up. I think he was up in Morningside somewhere, coming back towards Christopher, and the engine went on fire. And of course, when everybody took photos. It was funny in those days because nobody really walked around with phones or anything. But there was a couple of photographs of him trying to put out the fire with a bucket of water.
Yeah, well, that was a photo that was sent to me by Chris Wishart. So I can forward it on. Yeah,
no, I think I have it somewhere. I've got, again, everything's in boxes right now. We just we built a big house just off the island, and my wife got pretty sick, and she's good now, touch wood. We decided to sell it. It was too big to manage, and we're going to build a smaller house here downtown. So we're in a little, it's not little, it's 4-bedroom house, but it's good because I can store all my other stuff in it. So it'll do for a year. We're only a block back from the beach, which is nice, so we can take the dogs down and walk.
Very good. Yeah. Well, it's been really nice speaking to you. And thank you for doing the meeting with us and talking about your dad.
No problem at all. I'm still in touch with Roy through Jane. And you know, when I'm home, if there's a game on, I'll come along.
Good. It would be lovely. Yeah, East End Park.
Yeah. I don't know if they still do it, but the last game I was at, there was somebody owned a house right across the street before the match, and we went in there and had some drinks and stuff and met a whole bunch of people. Lovely.
That would be Joan and John.
I honestly can't remember the names, but they were nice enough to. Apparently they do it every game, so it was good. Enjoyed it. The only thing I'll say was I sat next to Roy, and he thought he was still playing because when the ball, he would kick, and I've got bruises still on my legs from when he was trying to kick the ball. Thought he was playing.
Well, thanks very much.
Okay, you're welcome. You're welcome. Up the pars.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Take care, folks.